that are on the table, which might be trying to substantiate money changing, because we know that Christ was very upset in his preaching against the money changers. This might be a way of legitimizing that, because that was one of the things that goldsmiths did. They would exchange money for different rates, different types of coins. So basically giving credence to that job, to the job of being a goldsmith, making that a noble and worthwhile pursuit. That's essentially what we're seeing. So it's kind of a corporate portrait. Later in the Baroque, we'll see a lot of things like this. Why is it not so good? The hands, if you look at the hands, they tend not to be very particularly well drawn. Look at, is there anything wrong with the face on the goldsmith? Yeah? Emily?
He's not looking at her. Is he? He kind of looks like he's just kind of looking out.
He's got this kind of odd gaze, which might have been a reference to some type of a devotional moment. I don't think his eyes are straight. I mean, to me, I put that line straight through his nose. I think the eyes got to come down. I think the eye is floating into space. It's being torn away by devotion. And I think the same thing kind of happens with this guy up here. There's just a primitive quality to him. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, I think I'm right. All right, so look at this piece for me for a little bit here before we start talking about it. This is kind of a... Can you see it all right? What are we seeing? Like, what's being depicted in the center?
Is it buried somewhere?
Pardon?
Is it buried somewhere?
Almost, but no. Why do you say burial? That's interesting.
Oh, because
Brittany.
the flowers and around it, but it looks like a child is dead in the street.
It looks like a child is dead in the street. Please, let's keep that thought. Okay? What else? Anyone else's thought? Because I like that one.
Did a mother lose a child? Like,
Well, there is a child laying in the street.
I know, but the woman above it.
Who do you suppose that is?
Is that Mary?
It's the Virgin Mary.
Mary?
Okay? Who's this? That's Joseph. Not a bad looking Joseph, I get. At least you're not making fun of him.
Oh, this is the birth of Christ.
It's a nativity scene.
But why is he on the moon?
You think this would make a good Christmas card?
No.
To show the joy of the season. Because it's a
It
nativity.
looks like he's dead.
But like he almost like blends into the pavement.
Yeah,
so you can barely see it.
Where's the little Christ child usually?
In the manger.
Yeah, he's usually in a manger, right? He's not in a manger in this one. He's just literally laying on the stone floor.
That's
Okay.
so weird.
Who are these guys? Yeah. So we have the shepherds coming in, and the shepherds are actually kind of cool. The elder shepherd, they're beautifully painted. This guy was a really good painter. The elder shepherd has this sense of grace and devotion. This shepherd is more youthful. And then there's a final shepherd who's just, he looks like a bumpkin, you know. He looks like a simpleton, but at the same time, so he has this dazed look on his face, but at the same time he has his hat over his heart, and there's this real connection of adoration, you know, that they understand how important this moment is. And then, of course, there's angels all around, and the angels tend to be small, so we have kind of a hierarchical scale thing going on. What's happening in the sides, you suppose? Who are these two people? Emily, what do you think?
Did they commission them?
They did.
Okay.
They did. So this is Tommaso Portinari, okay, and his wife. And his wife is named Margaret. Because this is St. Margaret. Yeah, go ahead.
It's, I mean, like, I think you can tell just because their clothes are different from the other people's clothes. They're very northern, but then the other people are like kind of more Italian in a way. Like for clothing style.
Yeah, if you
And
really,
older.
if you look at their clothing style, it's definitely more formal than the clothing that we have of the actual
Yeah.
important players in the nativity scene. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. By the way, who's missing from the nativity scene? Who's not there that should really be there to make this a nice nativity piece? Who shows up at the grand entrance? Hmm?
Gabriel?
No, that's not who I'm thinking of. 3 guys.
Wise one.
Yeah, 3 wise men. Why aren't they there? And they're not there because they're lost. Okay? They're over here. You have no idea where the hell they're at. And they have a little page up here talking to a peasant saying, how do we get to this spot? Okay? Because we're not quite sure. So let's look at this a little closer, because this is a really bizarre painting. So on this side, this is fairly close. We have Saint Mark and Saint Thomas. Let's see if I can list it. Yeah. So Saint Thomas is the patron saint of Portinari. He's the Italian merchant that commissioned this thing. And then St. Mark is here, and that's the name of the one son. Or no, I'm sorry, it's not St. Mark, it's St. Anthony. This is St. Anthony. The one son's name is Anthony. This little guy here, his name is Pagello. And they painted him in later, and they didn't fit the saint in. But the better connection here is over here, where we have the wife, who is Margaret. So here's St. Margaret. And then, what's the little daughter's name? Who is the saint?
Magdalene.
St. Mary Magdalene. How did you know that?
John.
By God. Thank you. Excellent. What's the attribute of St. Margaret?
Red. Dragon.
A dragon, right? You see the dragon that she's standing on? And it looks like it's going to eat poor little Mary here. Okay? I mean, that's one nasty looking dragon next to this adorable little daughter, who, by the way, the children are really beautifully painted. And then the final little thing out of this that's just weird. Can you see what's happening up here? You've got the donkey and Joseph and Mary. Mary she's pregnant and she's late. And it's difficult, and he's literally taking her off the donkey because it's too hard to ride on it anymore, and he's helping her down the hill. Now, there's never ever been any suggestion that Mary's pregnancy, here come the lights, was anything other than lovely and delightful. But here is portrayed as a more normal pregnancy. So this is a really odd painting. What have I missed here? Okay, Hugo van der Goes is the artist. It's called the Portinari altarpiece. It is a nativity with lots of things thrown in there that nativities usually don't have. It is the saddest nativity you'll ever see. So what are they foreshadowing in the nativity? The crucifixion. Absolutely. Most nativities don't do that. They try to be joyous and happy. Okay? We know the story. We don't really need to be reminded of the horrible thing that happens, but Hugo van der Goes does in the piece. It's a very somber, sad piece. And look at the size of this thing. So the main panel is 8 feet, 10 feet. The center panels are 5. So it's basically 15 feet across and about 10 feet tall. Huge tribute. massive triptych. And Portinari is an Italian merchant. He brings this thing back to Florence in 1476. And I'm telling you, the Italian painters, they flipped their lid when they saw this thing. They never imagined this. It had a huge influence on a number of Italian painters. The sheaf of wheat that lays here, I remember my art history teacher just basically saying that the sheaf of wheat that so mirrors the little Christ child was a symbol of the crucifixion. That the harvesting of wheat and the aspect of harvesting it as bread, but just the thought of cutting it down, that was an actual symbol of the crucifixion of Christ. And so we see that sheaf, and it's just like the baby. You have that connection, like with the Roger van der Weyden deposition where the Virgin Mary and Christ are in the same pose. The flowers, and this is so telling because of current history, but the flowers that we see here are lilies and irises. And the lilies are there for purity, but there's also irises there that are for not the joy, but the sorrows of the Virgin. And then these are columbines. And columbines in the Middle Ages were symbols of loss. They were symbols of sadness and sorrow. So these flowers are all basically symbols of the crucifixion. And then the Majolica vase that they're in has a grape motif on it. And that also is a symbol of the crucifixion and the transformation of Christ's blood into wine during the actual Mass. So again, all these hidden symbols. Somewhere up here, I've never really had a great look at it. I think we all need to go to the Uffizi and see this, but right up in this corner is a demon. So there's actually a demon looking in from the actual manger, which is quite a nice manger, kind of an Italianate relic, just above the ox and the mule. Interestingly enough, shortly after Hugo did this painting, he retired from being the dean of the Ghent Painters Guild, which was a huge honor. He retired from that position, and he retired to a monastery because he had some kind of an emotional breakdown. So he retired from public life, went to the monastery. Still painted in the monastery, but it seems art historians like to think that he had some type of, who knows, maybe he was bipolar or something like that, but he seems to have had some kind of a breakdown shortly after doing this and just took himself away from that position and went to the monastery and lived the rest of his life there. So he's sometimes looked at as the Vincent van Gogh of the 15th century. But this is that instance where, all the Italian painters were considered the best, and all the Northerners were supposed to go to Italy and learn from the Italians. The Italians learned quite a bit when this painting came to Florence. Okay, and then the last person we'll look at for the North is Hans Memling. So, Dirk Waltz and Peter Christos, kind of lesser painters. Certainly not as good as Jan and Roger van der Weyden. Hugo van der Goes, the guy we just looked at, fantastic. Doesn't have a huge body of work, but that piece we just looked at is hard to beat. Beautifully painted, very interesting on an iconographic level. The whole scheme, unusual, sensitive painting of the children, everything you would want. And then there's Hans Memling. And Hans Memling, we're going to have this term called mannerism when we talk about the transition from the Italian Renaissance to the Baroque. And mannerism is a period where art is all about the style that preceded it. Style and fashion is everything to a work of art. That's your main reason for making it. And I think you could say that of Hans Memling. He was very mannerist in the fact that he took the ideas of Roger van der Weyden and Jan van Eyck and he brought them up to an extremely polished level. And his little Christ children are as delicate and lovely as we saw with Derek Boots, much better than Jan's. Jan was not great at painting children. His virgins are these beautiful, delicate, perfectly proportioned late Gothic princesses. So you look at her and look how different she is in the way she's depicted. Look at those delicate, beautiful hands. And if we flash back, look at that change. A lot of art historians thought this was much better because this was just a little too pretty. But it's perfect. You know, for what these artists were driving at, it seems to come to this moment with Hans Memling where everything is, the painting is precise, the design is perfect, portraiture is lovely. In the 1800s and the 19th century, the art scholars hated this guy. One of them called him insipid, basically meaning he took everything that was important about this movement and he eliminated all the guts to it, and he just created these really saccharine, sweet, perfect little paintings. Today, we look at it as just a culmination. Snyder calls it the late Gothic dream, Hans Memling. This final moment in Gothic art where everything is just as precise and beautiful as possible. So this particular diptych of Martin van Niemenhof, he was like 24, but a young merchant who commissioned Hans Memling to do this private devotional diptych. And the idea here is that young Martin is in his home. This is his house that's being depicted in the interior, and he's reading his little book of hours, his little hand-bound book of hours, and while he's praying, saying that prayer, the Virgin Mary and the Christ child miraculously appear to him. So this is a mystical vision, and this is a portrait of an actual individual. Does that make sense? And these were very common. We've already seen, like with the Marot altarpiece, the man that commissioned that is looking through the doorway and seeing the Annunciation. Well, here we have this connection. The painting and the design is just beautiful. So